Hello, and welcome back to another Fishy Plant Man production. Okay, I toyed with the idea of adding CO2 early and even talking about it. Well, I guess I might talk about it a little bit, but I've decided that because I haven't bought the tank yet, and that's kind of a hefty little purchase there. Actually, it's kind of like a deposit that you don't get back because I decided to just buy a tank from the welding company that I will be getting the CO2 through. So you don't really buy the tank, it's just, like I said, like a deposit that you never get back in case you get refill someplace else or something. Then whatever tank you have at the time, you've technically bought. So you can do that. But anyway, the cost of refilling the tank ain't that big a deal, but I haven't bought the tank yet. So yeah, that part is a big deal. So the algae's about the same. It seems to have all but stopped growing. I mean, I know you look at that back wall, it's disgusting. But I think it may have stopped growing since I cut back the feed. I don't know. It's only been like a week, so I don't know. The tiger has put out its first variegated leaf. The other two are just red. This one's got some green in it. So, yeah. That's kind of cool. It's got 3 little leaves now. It's going crazy. But then everybody else is growing too. Both the pink, what is it? Scarlet Temple. I'll remember that one day. I believe it's Scarlet Temple. And whatever this other one is, it's got another pair of leaves. It's even showing red in the new leaves. Where the red seems to have all but disappeared everywhere else, the new leaves seem to have some red in them again. So yeah, I don't want to go down in intensity, but I can dial back the time. This ain't the only tank with algae problems. Algae, whatever you want to call it. Both the 55 and ironically just one of the 10s has got a problem too. So I bought a timer and I put the one tank, the low-tech tank, on the timer. And the other two, I should have bought 3 timers, but I only bought one. The other two, when I notice that the low-tech tank is turned off, I turn off the other two. Kind of wanted to film in those tanks today, but the lights are already off, so I didn't get to it in time. But as far as the CO2 is concerned, I will continue with whatever I get out of the bell. I don't think it's making much of a difference in the atmospheric CO2, but it probably is doing something. Will the plants notice? Oh, maybe. But I don't think I'll see much of a difference. It's kind of like if you walk into your house expecting it to be 70 degrees because you have air conditioning, and you walk in and let's say it's 80. Would you notice that 10-degree difference? I think most people would. Could they guarantee you that when you walk up to that thermometer, even though it's supposed to be 70, it's actually 80? Right on the nose? Probably not. But I would not be surprised if you walked into your house that was 80 and you were expecting it to be 70. The minute you walk in, you're going to think, something went wrong with the AC. It's too warm in here. That part I would believe. I would not believe that you would go, it's 80 degrees now, and walk over to the thermostat and be like, yep, 80 degrees. No. But could you tell that it was warmer than it should be? Yeah, that you can probably do. I'm not sure where that range is, but yeah, I would think most people could notice a 10-degree difference. And I used Fahrenheit, but just a 10-degree difference. You don't need to go figure out what that is in Celsius. The example was mainly a 10-degree difference. So I think 80 is somewhere around 20 in Celsius. Yeah, not really. 80 is quite a bit higher than 20. But I'm not going to worry about it. Like I said, it's the 10-degree difference that I was talking about. So yeah, the plants might notice a difference. I don't know that I'll see it. But there seems to be this idea that the only thing this is doing is once it gets to the top, that surface agitation. It's letting in oxygen from the air, and any CO2 that's in this area is getting in from the surface. Okay, I can buy that's where most of the exchange happens. But most. I just spit in my tank. How disgusting. Most. Because I subscribe to the idea that whatever's in that bell and whatever's in those bubbles is diffusing all the way up. Now it takes these bubbles, a third of a second to get to the surface of the tank? So they're not diffusing much. But each one of those bubbles with the water around it's the same thing as once it's at the surface. So all through this column there is diffusion. It's just each bubble is not doing much on the way to the surface. Whatever is inside the bubble, most of it, like 99% or maybe even more, is going to end up coming into the atmosphere when it pops at the surface. That I do agree with. But it's not... People sound like all the way up to the surface. It's not doing nothing until it gets to the surface, and that's where all the action is happening. No. Each bubble is diffusing a tiny bit, maybe. But it is diffusing all the way up. And that doesn't make a difference with the individual bubble, but every bubble that comes out of there is diffusing something as it goes up. And then it pops at the surface and everything ends up in the air. Well, CO2 is heavier than air, so it's creating a mist on top of the tank, however deep it is. Well, that could be true. And I've got a gap. Although that gap isn't so that CO2 can, collect at the surface of the tank, although that might be a nice side effect. The gap is because apparently rainbows, I've heard, are jumpers. So if these guys jump, I don't think they can jump that high. And so far, nobody has jumped that high and jumped up out of the tank. Can they? on a good jump, maybe they could jump out. I don't know. I don't know what a good jump is for these guys. So, that's my thought. And it's not a big deal. I mean, each bubble, it might as well not be diffusing anything as fast as they travel to the top. But any oxygen, any CO2 that is in them can diffuse out on the way to the surface. Nothing is stopping it. I mean, a bubble underwater, it's the surface of the water. All the way around the circumference of that bubble is like the surface. It's just still underwater. Until, like I say, a third of a second that it takes it to reach the top of the tank. So, yeah. If oxygen didn't diffuse as it was rising, why would CO2? The idea of the CO2 diffuser is to make the bubbles small so they don't travel as fast. But they diffuse all the way up to the top, and then they burst, and whatever's left goes into the atmosphere. But if you believe that CO bubbles diffuse while underwater, why wouldn't oxygen bubbles? So, atmospheric CO2 is not going to diffuse a lot, not traveling that fast, which is why I still want to eventually do CO2. But between not wanting to spend the money at this moment, and the other is I don't have a one-way check valve for the CO2 tubing, which I don't know if it's CO2 tubing that I got, but I got a bunch of tubing. Got like 20 feet of tubing. I can replace it as I notice holes. But I want to put a check valve in there. There may be a check valve built in to my regulator. It's expensive enough that there might be a check valve built into it. But if there's not, I want the peace of mind that, water can't get back to the regulator. And even if there is a check valve built in, a second $2 check valve to protect a $200 regulator, like I say, $2 to protect $200. That's insurance I will buy every day of the week, all day long. So yeah, I'm going to wait until I can find a regulator. I tried ordering one with the plants and everything else, and it's on the paperwork, but they said they credited the exact amount of the regulator back to my account. And even though the check valve is on the paperwork, it wasn't in the shipment. So, hopefully that, $2.25 or whatever it was, went back onto my card. But, yeah, even if it didn't, I just need to now find one someplace else. So eventually, I still plan to run CO2. I just don't want to make a hefty purchase for the hobby right now. So I guess that will be the rant on CO2. Yeah. And as soon as I find out my time, I've got to go. Talk to you next time.